Hi, everybody, and welcome to Terf Talk Down Under. My name is Angie, and I've got Ruth here with me today. Hi, Ruth. How you going?
Hello, just getting teched up here.
Yes.
I'm good.
Now,
Yeah.
Ruth and I have been sort of following each other on Twitter for a long time, and we recently met up in person at a turfy thing and realised that our sort of paths had crossed at other times. You know, we had a few things in common. And Ruth told me part of her story then, and I thought she'd be an interesting guest to come on Turf Talk Down Under. So Ruth, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Well, how long have we got? I'll try and keep it short because I have a big story. But I think what's relevant at the moment is to, and in the talking that we've just been doing, is the state of things. The state of things. I've been a feminist for 40 years, and I really would have expected more at this point. I would have expected to be kind of retired and just watching, lesbians have a wonderful culture and children being safe and all of women's protections being, if even more entrenched. And instead of that, it's an absolute wipeout.
Yeah.
And I just find it outrageous, absolutely outrageous. And I think maybe about 10 years ago, because I used to talk to a lot of young people, I dropped the word feminism into the conversation, and it was like a dirty word.
Yeah.
And then I'd drop it in all the time, and it was a dirty word with women of my age too. And I just thought, what's happened here that we're not talking about feminism? And then I dropped in the word patriarchy, and just like, boom, it was like, you don't talk about patriarchy. So I haven't stopped. I have not stopped, because if you cannot understand the structures, the mindset and everything around us, then you end up thinking that you're crazy. And, we sort of won that battle half a century ago. This is what I keep saying on, on Twitter and on Instagram. Like half a century ago, we won some really significant battles. And it's as if, they've gone. And that then they were never here. And I'm not leaving this world until there's some sort of traction. And you just think, well, how bad does it have to get before people really wake up to what's been missed here?
Yeah. I had someone say to me this morning that patriarchy was an old-fashioned concept.
You're running the show. I often say on the socials, it's really very simple. The world is arranged around men. Men are elevated above women, and women have been trying to, have some sort of equal footing in the world. And what are men doing is my question. Like, are men meeting us in that? And they just keep pushing us down, because they're frightened that if women, get traction, they're going to be above here and they're going to, kill them, going to do to them what they've done to us. And they don't seem to have a concept about, egalitarianism. So, go on.
Oh, and they think because one or two women have gained equal status to men, that all women are equal.
Well, I just keep coming back to, radical feminism, which is, it's not about equality. It's not about women being equal to men in a world made for and by men. That's not equality.
Don't want it.
No, thanks. It's liberation from patriarchal oppression. And they might be old-fashioned terms, but they still operate, and they're even worse than they were. But it's just got to sort of taken different forms. So I'm trying to write a book which is just stripped back what feminism is, what patriarchy is, how it works, and where we're at right now. And because I've never gone through academia. Every time I tried to go there, I would just be kind of bounced out. And I'm glad about that, because it's meant that I've just worked with independent thinking from quite a few different angles. And last year, I actually decided that I was going to give myself a PhD. I was going to give it to me because no one else is going to give it. And it was Professor Boo. I am BOO. I'm an expert in the bleeding obvious observations.
Excellent.
When I tell people that, I say, and don't underestimate how hard that was, because to strip back the lies, to find the truth in the lies, is really hard work. And patriarchy is a system of lies. It's just lies and distortions and obfuscations. And if you have a sense of the truth and a sense of meaning and a sense of integrity, you just walk around scratching your head thinking, why don't I fit in? Why don't I don't understand the world. I don't understand how it works. So I think anyone on this planet needs to have some kind of map, some sort of orientation into what the world actually is and how it works. So I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. There was pizza with the lot. There was mental illness. There was child sexual abuse. There was neglect. And on multiple levels, multiple people, all behind a thin veneer of civility. We were Roman Catholic, you know, my father was professional. It was, but what was happening behind closed doors was just shocking. And there was no way to make sense of that. And my mother was, she bore the brunt of that, and she was in and out of mental asylums. She was drugged, she was shock treated. And I always felt that she was actually the one who was sane, and the rest of them were a bit weird.
Yeah.
And that was my thread, really, in my life, to try and understand what was really going on, because things weren't as they seemed. But the whole world seemed to be working on the same premise. You be quiet, you don't say anything, you just pretend that there's nothing wrong and get on with it. And meanwhile, women drop like flies.
Yep.
And you know, this was also, we lived in Canberra in the 60s, which was, you know, suburbia, just the worst kind of suburbia. And so all the women were so shockingly isolated. You know, we didn't even have a footpath in the street until, you know, probably 1970. It was just crazy. So I used to think, well, it's sort of sane for people, for women to go crazy in this setup. So that was a really, that was one of those threads through my life to understand what was really going on here and why everything felt so empty and so false, and why, you know, everyone around me drank themselves into some sort of stupor, and that wasn't the life that I wanted. Anyway, I had 2 children. I was a bit of a hippie, and sustainability was a really important thing, self-sufficiency. And so I thought I was just going to, you know, drop out, tune in. What is it? Tune in, drop out. And having children, really, like, the world was so hostile. You couldn't take your child out anywhere. You know, you had to feed your child in the toilets. There was no change rooms. You couldn't get your pusher up into the bus. It was just a really strong sense of injustice, that the world was organised for people without children. And that was something that I felt was really unfair. I'd studied interior design. I was really interested in how the world was constructed for people, and it just seemed crazy to me that you just didn't have any, no one was thinking about your needs.
And women didn't drive back then.
No.
You know, it wasn't really until the 70s that most women started driving. Yeah.
So you were just isolated. I'd intensively brought up 2 children. And at that time, which was 1979, 1981, they were born, the nuclear, countdown was happening. And I was enraged that there were, 2 top dogs, one in Russia, one in America, with their hands on the buzzers. And it was like, well, why? Why could the whole world go up in smoke when here I am, in the day-to-day of life with 2 young children and wanting to be with them and wanting life to flourish. So I was part of an intentional community. We had houses in the same street. We had a country property. This is in Adelaide. That was, permaculture was happening there. We even had an alternative technology shop on the high street selling windmills and solar panels, and it was wonderful when we had kids co-op, and it was really good because all of us wanted something other than the nuclear family. So I went on marches, peace activist marches, and then I saw these women marching in Alice Springs in the middle of the desert at this Pine Gap Women's Peace protest. And the US base at Pine Gap, and I was just riveted. And so I made arrangements to go up for the second week to be there. I was just like, wow, this is like, it was a bit like, a heart starter again. And because it was pretty hard life at that time. So my partner took me to the Adelaide railway station, and I walked around the corner to where the train was on the platform, and there was a group of lesbians. And I don't think I'd ever seen a group of lesbians before, but I knew immediately these were my people. And it was just extraordinary to spend a week in the desert with women working together. And there were a lot of women. Something's happened here. There are a lot of women who realized they were lesbians. It was quite something. Now something's gone wrong with my...
Looks fine from here.
All right, well, I'll just continue. I can't see you. No. So that was a turning point for me about, you hear about identities and, finding your authentic self, and it really, I can't hear that anymore because it just feels so false. But I knew I was a lesbian, and I knew that the life that I built wasn't quite the one for me. So anyway, there's a lot to say, but I ended up going to Sydney, spending some time in Sydney with, I had a lesbian partner, and I went, before that happened, the next peace activist thing was at Coburn Sound in Western Australia. And we had such a great time in the campsite. There was massage and singing and, tarot cards, and it was just this gorgeous women's culture. And so the next year we decided to have Witches and Wild Women event. And so for the next 2 years, these wild, feral, mostly lesbians would gather, and we would just have a week of just building community and having fun. And it's a bit like, boys can play with their war toys, but let's invest in life. they were really powerful times. So my experience of feminism at that time was women's spirituality and the feminism that was about the archetypes of the feminine principle. So it wasn't about, you know, being a CEO, being in the CBD, you know, it was about understanding women's culture, understanding what it is to be a mother, to be part of these, you know, women's mysteries. And that was really very powerful for me. It was also extraordinary to be a lesbian feminist. I met a lot of women later on who didn't have feminism to give them that boost, because there's a lot of shame in being a lesbian. So for a lot of women, and women were put into mental institutions and shock treated, and, you know, pretty horrible stuff. So I feel like I was in.
Yeah, women were having their children taken off them because they were lesbians.
Yeah.
You know, and if you divorced your husband because, you know, you realised that you were not, you know, straight, and it was unfair on him for you to stay in that relationship, you would automatically have your children kept from you. And what a decision to make. You had to just choose between living a lie or your children.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Horrific.
And, you know, you can't sort of go back in the box when you experience such a freedom. And that's what I felt. I just felt so free to be a woman without having to organise my life around a man or other men. So for a while, you know, it was a bit of, you know, I lived for a while going up the East Coast to women's festivals, music festivals, women's retreats. It was the most wonderful culture. I remember this retreat we went on somewhere in New South Wales near a river, and it was astonishing to see just these women being free. So women of all shapes and sizes, you know, barely with any clothes on, just being themselves. And that was shock to me because, you know, our culture is so much about being slim and, you know, matching your clothes and your shoes and your handbag. And here are these women just being free. It was nothing like it. And I miss my sort of feral women.
Because women behave differently when they're away from the male gaze. All women do.
Totally. It's really hard to put into words what happens, and this is why it's so devastating to have lost the ability to meet freely. Because when there's just one man in a room, everything changes.
Yep.
And as I was saying before, to me, the genius of feminism was women breaking the silence about how we really experienced our lives behind the closed doors. And women started to talk about what they were experiencing. And that's the revolution. And I really feel we're a long way away from that. The other thing that was important about those times was the gay and lesbian community in Sydney. Well, on the one hand, there were those of us who went down the path of recovery from trauma and shame and addiction. And the gay and lesbian people in 12-step recovery, Alcoholics Anonymous, Al-Anon, Adult Children of Alcoholics, there's a whole raft of 12-step programs. And that was extraordinary because it broke open a very conservative form of recovery. And I wouldn't have spent 2 minutes in a meeting had it not been for the gay and lesbian I don't know, it just opened up the doors and the windows.
Mm.
On the other hand, this is only sort of 10 years after the main kind of liberation, gay and lesbian liberation. What I saw was in that umbrella world, there was a lot of unresolved sexual shame and trauma. And there was a path where people went down this hedonistic libertarian path.
Yep.
And sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And really that's what I see now, is just this absolute juggernaut of unresolved trauma. It's creating havoc. So I was very grateful for that. The input of gay and lesbian culture. It's really quite remarkable when it is, working for life and dignity. And one of the things I find so hard about this time is that all of the work that was done, all the social capital to say to the public that homosexuality isn't a sexual perversion.
No.
It's a sexuality.
Yep.
And now it's like, it's just perversion. It's just insane.
It is. It's one of the most heartbreaking things, for someone who was alive, during the 80s. I worked in a gay bar. I saw with firsthand, what it was like. And, now to have, have the Q plus whatever furries, etc., all acting up and having it be attributed to the LGB. It's just so offensive, And asexuals claiming to be part of the acronym as well. How utterly patronising that is, It's awful.
I just, like, I'm a pacifist, I'm a compassionate woman, but honestly, I'm just appalled. And I'm just, one of the things we were talking about, Kellie-Jay Keen, one of the things I really have appreciated about her is that she just calls a spade a spade. She draws a line in the sand and she's not buying any of it. She's not using the language. And that was quite shocking. I heard her first on trigonometry and it was like, oh, she's not using the terminology that is kind and polite. And it encouraged me to just, call it for what it is, because in 40 years of recovering from addiction and sexual abuse as a young child, I need reality. Bottom line, I need the truth and I need reality. And part of being, in a family where sexual abuse was happening was that there was no safe place to be, and that you were told what was real and what wasn't real. And really your sort of psychological health depended on doing what you were told, because there's nothing else you can do. And so I will not be told, that what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what I'm sensing is not what's happening.
Yep.
That's my bottom line. No.
You've told your red flags don't exist. Say, no, you say that's a predator. And everyone around you says, no, it's not. How damaging is that for someone who's, been abused? It is the most damaging thing you can do to a survivor, is to re-victimize them by denying their reality.
Totally. Because it takes everything to get hold of the truth and to find other people who can speak the truth, and we can find a patterning. So as it was with feminism, to understand that, it wasn't necessarily that I was broken or that my mother was broken. It was there was a system that didn't let you live as, yourself. And so to go through addiction recovery and to hear the stories and to build a picture of the patterning of this thing called, alcoholism, which takes over people's lives. There was this moment where I read a book by a woman called Anne Wilson Schaaf, When Society Becomes an Addict. And she was a feminist, psychologist, feminist. She used to talk, go to auditoriums full of people and talk about feminism. And she was also working with 12-step program because someone in her life was an alcoholic. And she says that she was in this auditorium speaking about feminism, and she had a moment where, patriarchy and how it works and alcoholism and how it works just fused, and she understood they were the same thing. And what was memorable about reading that was that she felt in that moment that the roof was going to split apart and she was going to be just fried with a bolt of lightning because she'd come right up against this force field of, the lie and the truth, and she'd cracked something open for herself. And I thought that was really interesting, that the lie is so strong, and this false idea of power it's the same thing.
Because women are ultimately, like, we're the givers of life. We're ultimately the most powerful people on the planet. So when we talk about how the power structures within society, it's all men here. But who brought all these men into the world? And that's why they're so keen to hold us down, because we have so much power. And that's the way I like to look at it anyway.
Totally. Absolutely. And when the addiction that men find themselves in this system of patriarchy is that they're elevated above women, when really it's an artificial elevation. They don't earn that, and they often earn it by pushing women down further and further so they can feel elevated. And one of the great tragedies for me is that men of my generation didn't listen to feminism. They didn't listen to what feminism was about. They didn't bother to learn about what patriarchy is and how they are falsely elevated, so they feel empty.
They do.
And they're very sensitive to it, and they come out fighting when they're feeling a bit shaky. It's because they're morally bankrupt, because they've been fed these lollies. Patriarchy works through men, and if men really wanted to be part of building an egalitarian world, they would be learning from feminists what patriarchy is so that they can unpack it within themselves. And actually build some kind of moral sense of value from the inside out, rather than just be given free tokens to dominate women. Yeah.
Or rather gives lip service while they whack off to porn.
I know. And this is, on the socials, it's just constant, like if you say men harm women, they come at you with, not all men. You hate women, or you hate men. And these days I just say, yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. For a while I would say, I hate what men do to women.
And
I hate that they don't take responsibility for it and make amends and change things. And I hate that they're more interested in their very fine men's reputation than they are what's really happening to women, and changing that. So, the thing is that men hate women who speak about the ways men hate women.
Yeah. Even on my interactions on social media, I don't get into arguments with trans people. I get into arguments with men, just normal, everyday men. who are enraged, who are absolutely enraged that women are standing up and saying, no, we don't want other men in our female-only spaces. We want something just for us. And they're driven insane by it.
Well, it's like an addict in withdrawal. That false source of their power, that they're allowed, the whole system of patriarchy in this world, all the legal systems, everything protects the perpetrator and protects men to harm women, because patriarchy is male over female, power over system, and they get to feel good about themselves by being powerful, but they're not. And when women say no, they go into a flat spin because they have to have access to women. So when, when I was back on the horse, talking about feminism, talking about patriarchy, and then COVID hit, and I thought, well, what are the radical feminists doing? That's really my hometown. And I went into the rad fem rabbit holes, and if I didn't have white hair before I started, I would have it after going down there. I started to get a handle on the what I call the trans Trojan horse, and I've just been in shock ever since. And for anybody who really understands how patriarchy works, the whole thing is so obviously, bleeding bloody obvious, a patriarchal initiative.
Yeah, of course.
It's a power over system. And one of the ways patriarchy works is that because it's so empty, it's predatory and parasitic. So it latches onto a host, it sucks the life out of it, and then it sort of repackages and markets something, a version of reality. And so this very fake astroturfed minority is an absolute confection with the emphasis on con. It's just, you just think, why are people buying this? This is just so ridiculous.
Yeah.
I'm constantly saying online, the gender stereotypes were smashed half a century ago. Feminism smashed the stereotypes of what a man and what a woman, what the roles, rules, regulations, and uniforms were, and people were free to be individuals. And I talk a lot about the archetypal masculine principle and the archetypal feminine principle. Jung talked about it as the anima and the animus. So, I remember, some of us remember men suddenly with long hair and soft clothing. I think it was the Beatles, going to India at that point. And then women with short hair and suits. It was a massive social shift because the roles and the rules were very, very clearly defined. And there were a lot of gender non-conforming people, but it just blew right out. And so people were, mixing and matching, exploring both.
And the pill was coming by then, like the contraception had improved. So, women didn't necessarily have to fear getting pregnant.
Yeah.
So
you didn't have to be a mother if you didn't want to be a mother. And that was massive, absolutely massive. Because that was your father took you down the aisle, gave you to your husband. That was it. Off you go. It was a massive shift. And so it's just appalling to me that the stereotypes are back in, and that if you're a boy, and you like pink, or if you're a girl and you like trucks, you're born with the wrong body.
It's ridiculous.
It's absolutely ridiculous, and it's such a con. So I keep saying to people, I don't care if nobody wants to hear me, I just keep saying it. the taking up the archetypal principles of the masculine and the feminine are something that it's there as a free process. It's soul process. It's free. Do it in your own way and time. And that battle's won. But now they've reinstated it.
And just the fact that, you know, that women have been reduced to a set of stereotypes, basically. And that those the men who have been, you know, who have attached themselves to those stereotypes are so powerful that women aren't even women anymore. We're bleeders and uterus havers. Yeah. It's just insane. Yeah. And people lap it up. Women lap it up. Women who I used to think had a brain. You know, there's women, you know, certain public figures that, you know, that call themselves feminists but aren't. And I can say that with confidence because as far as I'm concerned, if you think men are women and that, you know, that prostitution is a wonderful, empowering choice for young girls, then you're not a feminist. But, you know, women who I thought had some critical thought are completely sucked in by this ideology. And it's not just the ones that are getting paid by ACON to you know, perpetuate it, because they're employing a lot of same-sex attracted people to market the principles of gender ideology through institutions and stuff like that. So it's not just those people, those sellouts, who are actually getting some incentive to do it. They're people with no skin in the game who are out spruiking this stuff. And that's the astonishing thing, because, you know, my children can see that the stereotypes are just ridiculous, you know, and that just because you call yourself non-binary, you're still a girl, you know, like they can, you know, small children can see, and yet grown adults in positions of power, like our Premier, like a lot of our public figures, are lying to our faces about what a woman actually is, that it is just a bunch of pathetic stereotypes. Whereas if we'd been still betrothed to those stereotypes, most of those women would never have been elevated to the position that they have a public voice on anything at all, you know. And it's such a kick in the face to the feminists that came before us, the second wave, that thought, oh, right, you know, we've opened the gates and you girls can take it from here. And now look at it.
And now it's just in tatters. Absolute tatters. And I mean, to me, the women took up the feminine principle. Men, the opportunity was there for men to take up the feminine principle, to be more reflective, responsive, relational, reciprocal, you know, all those things that meant that you have more of an inner life. And I think that there's this threshold of shame that men, you know, hit up against the ways that men as a class, as a group, have harmed not only women and children, but nature and the whole earth. There's this idea that the feminine is it's about being vulnerable, and being vulnerable is like your dead meat on the highway. Just you cannot afford to be vulnerable. And yet the greatest strength comes from the vulnerability and the humility to say, I don't know everything. You know, the limit of my knowledge. There's more to know. There's more to learn. There's this hubris that men, because, you know, they're given this elevated status, they believe it, you know, and so they've got to keep topping it up. But it's like, come on, get real. Just what will it take for men to really come to that place of, I can't keep up the lie anymore, and I can't face what, you know, men are doing to women. And, you know, I heard this thing after the first lockdown that pornography had more hits than the combined usage of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Netflix, probably Amazon, pictures, whatever it is. Like, LinkedIn, all of those platforms that we were on all the time. But pornography was watched more than all of that together. And to me, I've been talking about pornography, on the socials. You'd say the word pornography, and there's this whole backlash of people saying, well, women like porn, and blah, 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 blah. But pornography is actually a public health hazard.
You know that the top search for pornography is teen, consistently over many decades. Teen.
Yeah. And there's a whole, we only sort of know what's on the top, and I really take my hat off to women feminists who actually go in there and see what's going on. But there are layers and layers of the sewers. So I think, in all the waves of feminism, the Me Too movement really hit a nerve.
Yes, I was going to bring that up. I was thinking that as you were talking about it, I'm thinking, Me Too had something to do, and this has been a bit of a pushback from Me Too, because it's like, so many men were found out, and they are in fear of because we know because of all the pornography views, we know that the men that we think we can trust are probably up to no good on some level.
Yeah. And they're the men who say not all women.
Yeah.
And I say, well, you may not be raping and murdering women, but you're watching porn.
Yeah, and you're watching women who are raped. If you're watching pornography, and all the ones you go, oh, I don't quite like this, I'll watch 3 seconds of it. Oh, no, I don't quite like this. No, that's not my thing. Every single one of those ones you scroll past is a human being.
Yes. Yeah. And then, they have the argument that that women are choosing that. And so I often say, well, how do you know that? And I say that, a lot of the unresolved trauma from sexual abuse, especially as a young child, is that women try and get back their power in the arena that they lost it. And it's like in the bargaining loop, the grief process. They just go round and round trying to get back what they lost in the arena that they can never find it again. And so I've often said to guys, well, how do you know that this woman isn't an abuse survivor and is powerless to get out of it? And that's
one of the most common trauma responses for young girls is promiscuity. Like, it's commonly known.
Well, in the power stakes, the power over stakes, children, young girls really start to understand that their sexuality is their power. That's how they get power over men. They never do, but it's a dance, and I think everyone who's been abused and rendered powerless and had their dignity taken, you have to get it back.
Yep.
And most people don't know how to get it back other than going in there again. And, I've had some friends who did the dominatrix thing. It's like, no, you don't ever have the power that you think you have. And it's set up. And this is where, men of my generation had the chance to get real, to build something, a moral center of gravity, instead of being given these free passes to do what they want. And what did they do? They didn't listen to feminists. They just got their surfboards and rode the wave of sexual liberation. And, created all of this, sexploitation platforms of all kinds. Pornography online is it's just crazy. It's like, you don't think we notice this? So I think,
and it's not just, it's degrading porn too, because I get sent stuff from random blokes send me porn, and they're not just watching, they're watching degrading things. They're watching rape. They're watching scenes that play out like schoolgirls, and they're watching really gross stuff. And that's all the mainstream stuff. If you can go, you can always look up, without going on Pornhub, you can look up most popular searches on Pornhub. And the list will see, you know, it makes you sick, basically. And if there's ever a celebrities, say, you know, if there's a celebrity comes and tours your city, the next porn search will be for you know, for women who look like this said celebrity. You know, it's just bizarre.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
And I think that the Me Too movement lifted the lid on the sewers of,
Yes.
of what I call, it was only recently I typed out a tweet and I said, men's sexual depravity and treachery. And I went, oh, you can't say that, you know? And I thought, yes, you can. This is naming it. It's men's sexual depravity. And the real kicker is that women are supposed to be silent about what happens to them and about what happens to the other women that they can see. And we're supposed to protect men from their sexual depravity. And that to me is just really like, wow. It's so deeply ingrained that we, you know, we have to protect men from knowing what they do. So that they can go on living as if they're the king of the kingdom.
See, I'm in my 50s and I can hold my own, right? And I was, you know, for I don't know why, but a couple of years after I separated from my kid's dad, I was online dating, and I nearly got like I was harassed, basically, you know. If they offered to pay for dinner, then you owed them. So there was like harassment and pressure to go to bed with these dudes. And I was one guy, I said no on the second date or something like that, and I thought he was going to rape me. Now I'm someone who's assertive, and I got myself out of that situation. But I thought of all the other women who aren't as assertive as me and who aren't thinking on their feet, who he would have invited back to his house. They would have done it and then blamed themselves. And, you know, there was, and I don't date men because of years of just thinking, what is wrong with these people? You know, that men who find themselves single at the same age that I do are, you know, are doing what these young men are doing and going out and watching violent pornography and then scrolling to the dating page and are taking women out on a date and saying, oh, look, I'll get dinner. And you say, yeah, you sure? Look, I'm happy, you know, I'll pay for it myself or happy to go out. No, I'll pay. And then hitting it on you in the car park. You know, like it's just insane. They don't see us as people. They don't see any value in us apart from as a receptacle. That's how I feel about men and how they see me. And I have been absolutely overjoyed to be aging out of the male gaze. You know, and I don't feel sad about it for myself. I feel sad for men. I feel sad that, you know, they have an opportunity. That all the women I admire are single or lesbians. All the women that I go, wow, that woman's really dynamic. She's got, you know, this and that. You know, a handful of them are in happy relationships, but most of them are lesbians or they're single women and happily single and just refuse to date. And I thought, that'll be me. I just can't do it anymore because I'm so sick of being disappointed because and it's not that I think, it's because they don't see me as a fully human person. They don't see me, they don't give, even in relationships that I've been in, their friends are more important to them as people. They see their friends more than they see their own partner as a functional, equal person with needs and, you know, worthy of respect. I just don't think men respect us at all. I really don't.
Well, that's what pornography will do, you know. It's misogynistic propaganda. And the earlier you watch it, the more your brain is wired to see women as objects. So we're objects and we don't have a voice. And so we're uterus havers and we're, you know, like the fragmentation is absolutely extraordinary. One of the things that I've noticed over time is that, you know, this category of sissy porn, where men dressed up as women are being trashed by other men. And I've noticed that I heard this trans widow, somebody who was married to a trans person, and she said that he had never shown any kind of interest in dressing up in her clothes or women's clothes, but he watched sissy porn and he got horribly addicted. And, you know, then it was on the AGP, you know, all the money went on his fetish. And she said that it was incredibly hypnotic. So there's strobe lighting. And I just think, look, you know, there's something behind, I call it patriarchy, central department of dirty tricks. And so this isn't accidental. And I call the trans Trojan Horse really this assault on women and children to smash all the gains that women have made to protect us from their depravity and children, and also, you know, lesbian sovereignty, I call it, because, you know, we're a porn category. Yeah. Like 40 years, it just, you know, constantly there's this sort of thing with men that, you know, I just haven't met the right one, you know, and so this terrible situation in lesbian culture, which is, you know, dead in the water, is transbians. So I think, you know, incels watch this porn, then and they watch this porn, they think they're women, they want to possess women, so they just, you know, they get off on doing all the things, and then they can, through this ideology, they can just hassle lesbians to have sex with them because it's transphobic not to.
Oh, that's just.
And I saw this young woman on TikTok, and she was distressed because she'd been raped by this guy who was identified as a woman, and she was more distressed about the fact that she was transphobic than she was raped. And you just think, oh, this is just a horrible wave of rape culture.
It is.
That is the ideology. I mean, it's power over, and you know what I hate? I really hate being called a Nazi, you know, and fuck, I hate that. It's like, look, we're not the ones with the propaganda, with the bullying, with the doxing, with the cancelling, with the sterilising, with the experimental surgeries and drugs. That's not us. That's you lot, you know.
See, they've got such a multi-pronged approach, though, because they're going after our bodies medically.
Yep.
They're going after us through the, you know, pornography and, you know, dehumanizing us in that way. But they're also going out after the one thing that we care most about, and that's children.
Yes.
And so there's this multi-pronged attack on women.
Yeah.
And I think that they're coming at us from all sides is deliberate. And also the Davo, that somehow us being transphobic is worse than all of the horrendous things that they are doing, which nobody is permitted to talk publicly about.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's the silencing. It's the silencing again. You can't say these things. I've got nothing to lose at this point. I've lost friends. I've lost family. I don't care anymore. I'm not getting off this horse because children are being mutilated. You know, children are being targeted, and you are not born in the wrong body. That is psychological warfare.
And mostly it's eugenics as well, because it's mostly autistic and same-sex attracted youth.
Yeah, that's right. So, you know, when you sort of look back, you know, take a step back and you look from different angles, you just think, look, the Nazis never left. And this idea of creating a superhuman, you know, you get rid of the weird ones. You get rid of the ones who aren't going to be these, you know, heterosexual, you know, healthy, sturdy, strong, you know, men and women procreating, you know, with this sort of great Ubermensch you just think it's really, really obvious, because they came after homosexuals, they came after people with disabilities, and they sterilized women. And so, you know, when I saw something recently about this, I thought it was real for a minute, but it probably is. But, you know, then it was like, oh no, it's not real. It's just this futuristic idea that babies can be born in these little pods, you know, and it was disgusting. Did you see that one?
No, but I know transhumanism has the ultimate, you know, that's part of the goal, that women are completely removed from the process.
That's right. Because women create babies that aren't perfect, you know. And so in, you know, to really progress humanity, let's bring the tech in, let's bring technology in, let's bring the scientists in, and let's create, you know, perfect babies. You know, in this model, you could, it's like a designer baby. You could, you know, have your different things that you wanted in that baby, and it was in this perfect environment. And, you know, and they were selling it to women that, you know, you didn't have to go through all that terrible process of birth. You know, it's just, everything's just outsourced for convenience. And it really disturbed me. I couldn't sleep that night, because, you know, this is where it's heading. So transhumanism is the end point of all of this. You know, we're being led, and it's being marketed. And I really like Jennifer Bialec's work, to follow the money and to stay with this absolute truth that she's come to, which is this is a transhuman agenda. And this is what it's about. And women are expendable in that model.
And language matters. The beginning was the removal of language. The beginning is the removal of language and bringing in language that denies reality. That is the beginning of it. So if you're wondering what to do about this, to put a stop to it, then my thing is you begin there, using plain language. Do you have any other suggestions of how people can just say, no, this is enough?
Oh, look, you know, I go through, you know, days of just going, oh my God, we're cooked. And then I think, no, there's, you know, there's something about women, you know, putting down anchors and drawing lines, working together and saying no to all of it. And this is why I love what Posey Parker does, because she just says no. She's really good with the language. And she also, we were talking about before, this sort of the fragmentation of feminism. It's just been awful. We're all absolutely traumatized by patriarchy, what it's done to our mothers. And I think that there's this terrible mother wound where a lot of women jump ship on womanhood, and they attach themselves to, you know, the father. They're the Athenas, you know, and they just attach themselves to patriarchy. They're the handmaidens, because this is a risk assessment that they've made, that they're going to be raped and killed last. That's really what it comes to. But so many women didn't want to end up like their mothers. And I think this was the thing that really fragmented feminism from the get-go. And women who didn't want to go down the drain like their mothers had gone, aligned themselves with the masculine principle. And women and mothers in feminism were not treated well, you know. And I think this is part of what's, you know, happening with Kellie-Jay Keen. She just staunchly says, I'm a mother. I loved being home with my children. I care about children. I'm not a feminist because they're all mean. And I'm just fighting for women's rights.
I did definitely feel for myself, you know, 20 years ago, that there was a choice for me to whether to be part of the feminist movement and to go off and have children. Those two things never came together. And I think, you know, we lost a lot of women because they had to make that choice. And that's when liberal feminism came in and said, aha, there's a gap here within within the second wave, you know, the women who are still left at the end of the second wave. And then the beauty myth came out where people said, oh, no, you can still have it all and whatever. Yeah. And then that's when the liberal feminists came in and went, right, you know, we can, men, the patriarchy can come in and convince women that what we want is empowering. So yeah, so the division within feminism, you know, we need to, not between us and the liberal feminists, because they're gone, but within feminism itself, between, you know, women who have a more, you know, conventional life, I guess, you know, the mums, the, you know, women on the school run, for example, if we can bridge the gap between them and the more radical separatist feminists, they have a lot to learn from each other. And although they're probably sitting at home, if they're watching it all, going, ooh, you know, it's in that coming together that we find strength, because in isolation, we're not going to beat this. We really do need to come together and say, look, we may disagree on a few things, but we're all still putting women first. We're still prioritizing women. Can we at least agree to trust each other to go into this battle together?
Totally. And I think also what Kellie-Jay is doing is really highlighting the fact that the political and legal systems don't work for women. So you can align to the right or the left or whatever, but, you know, none of them actually support women. So we are a global constituency of women. We don't have the power structures. We just have the fact that we're women. We are oppressed in the same ways. We know deeply what that means. We don't like it, and we're not having it anymore. And I think that's really powerful, because the right lineism, the sort of purism of, you know, whether you tick all the boxes, that has to go. And it's been too long in feminist circles where, you've got a right line, otherwise you're out. It's like when one of my grandchildren some years ago thought she was trans, and I didn't know quite, you know, what that whole story was, but I immediately went to one of my books on the shelf here and sent her a copy of goddesses, you know, Greek goddesses. And this was the thing in the women's spirituality feminism that I was part of. There's many ways of being a woman. And there's the CEO, Athena, which a lot of women took up. There's Hestia of the hearth, who manages the household. There's Hera, who's the, you know, hard-done wife. There's Venus, who's just the show-off. There's, you know, Hypatia, the scholar. There's Sappho, the lesbian. There's there must be a healer in there somewhere. But Artemis was the favourite of the lesbians. Artemis was not bound to men. She loved nature and animals. And so there was something for everyone, you know, like there are different ways of being a woman. And that is diversity. One of the things I really, really can't bear is how, and this is what patriarchy does in its predatory, parasitic, Puranic way, it just flips and twists. And then you've got the opposite. So inclusion has become exclusion.
Yep.
Diversity has become division. Transparency has become backroom deals. All of the legislation happens in the back room. Accountability becomes cancellation. And equality is now unisex toilets. Yes. It's like it's all twisted and turned. And just like you know, the abusive partner, he's going to twist and turn everything. I saw this article the other day about in Tasmania, a woman who rang up the police because her husband was beating her up, and the husband twisted it so that she looked like the one who was victimizing him. She got taken off. She had the family violence order against her. She lost her house. You know, it's insane. And this is apparently, people are waking up to the fact that this is happening because the police make the call about what's going on. And we all know how wonderfully biased they are towards themselves if they're men. So it's this twisting and turning so that everything that feminism has done is being twisted and turned. And so every time I see, this whole toilets, change rooms, wards, prisons, it just feels like a vindictive man saying, you think that you can get away from us? You think that, we can't have access to you? There's pretty soon there's going to be nowhere on this earth a woman can be without a man having access. And that is, to me, I just think, this is the inflammation point of a system that is not sustainable anymore, that is absolutely running on total addiction, total manipulation, vindictiveness, and it's going to burst. It's going to burst.
And I feel that desperateness. Like I feel that we're at a crucial point now, and I don't want, I never imagined that I would be willing to work with people that I'm actually willing to work with, because I think anyone who can help us to put this ideology, on the back foot, I'm going to accept their help. As long as they're not trying to undermine me in any other way, obvious, on this issue, I will seriously work with anyone who can, not anyone, but almost anyone who can help us push this back. I was likening it to an experience I had a few years ago where, I struggled to get support for my son who's on the autism spectrum. And the only person that would help me was the local MP, who was like a conservative liberal. And I was like, oh God, do I really have to work with this person? But I tell you what, I got on the front page of the local paper with her, which was like, because all my friends are going, ha ha ha, because I was a Labour Party member. They were laughing at me, whatever. But I tell you what, this woman went above and beyond for me and my family. We were really struggling to get support, and she went above and beyond. And that really, so when all that real tribalism comes in about, but you're a lefty and you're Labor, and how dare you work with these conservatives? I think back to that time, in my time of need, the only person, and I did go and ask for people's help, the only person that was willing to help me was this one woman, because she had her daughter had a child who was on the autism spectrum. So we had that bond, that we had that relatable thing, and with her power and influence, she was able to change some things for us in our community. So it's not just me who's benefited from this, And I like to think, I might be idealistic, I might be naive, but I like to think that most of the women who are from the other side, who are in this game, are in this for the same reasons that we are, not to further themselves personally, but to fight a dangerous, destructive, insidious, parasitic ideology that is attacking all of us. I like to give these women the benefit of the doubt. And until I see actual evidence, and not hearsay from whoever, or, she stood next to this person on this day, until I see actual evidence that these people are intending to cause harm, then I think I'm adult enough to make a decision about who I will and won't work with without having to suffer for it, I've just found this last few months really, really hard, because people are being, things are, it's such a crucial time. It really is a crucial time in Australia anyway.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that part of patriarchal thinking that we have to unpack is this polarity, either or. And I know it's really strong in America, the left or the right. It's like, look, the left or the right they don't work for women. There's got to be some sort of, there's a whole lot of middle ground. And, the hope was that when women went into politics, that they'd be working with power with models instead of power over models. and a lot of women do work with power over models, whatever. But somewhere, you know, I've been really impressed by women who have got into politics, who are working with, they're doing the power with, and they're working for, you know, what I've been left leaning about is, you know, people caring about other people, you know, working with people who are vulnerable. That's my bottom line. But I think about the 90s, you know, the Labor Party just seemed to, you know, be just as bad as the Liberal Party in that sort of exploiting the vulnerable. And so, but I see women in politics on both sides, and in the Greens, and what a catastrophe that is, and, you know, working for us, working for people. And I just think, you know, all power to you, because it's a hard business. But I've absolutely given up on leftist men. And I'm very saying on Twitter, leftist men won't face the fact that they're part of the biggest oppressor group in the world. They like to see themselves as the great liberators of the oppressed and the great, you know, champions of minorities. And this is why they've got a whole fake minority group that's astroturfed, you know, with big pharma and corporate backing, the trans movement, and it gives them a great chance to bash women like me who know that they're not being honest. But the next, you know, cap off the rank for leftists is the minority group of pedophiles, because they are so ostracized, the poor things. So, you know, for Kellie-Jay Keen to get a knock on the door from a policeman to say to her she's being warned because she's being untoward against pedophiles, is like, it's all, you know, the lid of the sewer is off and it's all on show.
They're in plain sight. I could name you 5 men. I could name you 5 men with nappy fetishes, and as far as I'm concerned, that's pedophilia. If you eroticize infancy, you're a pedophile. I could name you 5 blokes, 4 of them would be in the Greens. They're in plain sight. They're there. They're being elevated by this ideology. They're being given power by the people who promote this ideology. It's not just a hypothetical anymore. And the worst thing about it is that these people are telling us that they represent the LGBTQ plus, etc., when they don't. They don't at all.
No. Well, they're parasites, you know. They're opportunistic rapists and predators, and you know, you can't say anything about no group is beyond scrutiny when it comes to pedophilia. I mean, I've lived with the effects of child sexual abuse all my life. It fragments you. It's a real job to weave together the fragments. It's a lifetime sentence, and I don't hear enough about what it means to have been abused by an adult. I don't hear enough of what it does to a human being. I'm just hearing this libertarian, you know. So, you know, when you talk about the trans movement and you talk about the genesis of the trans movement, you've got Dr. John Money, you know, who was a pedophile, respected doctor at Harvard, I think. You know, you've got the queer theorists, and whose rallying cry is transgress every sexual boundary, you know, wanting to lower the age of consent to 4. This is what it's built on. And, you know, this is part of the fury. I just think, look, the basis of this is so rotten that you can't be behind it at all. There are children who are not comfortable in their bodies. We all know as a teenager, you're not comfortable in your body. I talked to this young woman on Instagram from America once who nearly went down the whole chute. And she said that she was 11 when she, you know, first found pornography on her phone. She didn't want to be a woman.
No.
She was terrified of being a woman. Now, all of these young women lining up in the gender clinics, why would you want to be a woman when it's just a lifetime of being trashed? You know, and you've got this option to take your breasts off and to, you know, take these heavy drugs rather than be a woman. And you cannot tell me that this isn't part of the reasoning, you know, and detransitioners, they are coming out, they're traumatized, being traumatized as children. They're homosexual, and it's not cool to be homosexual anymore. Honestly, I don't know how that happened. And autism. And it's just a catastrophe. And at the basis of it, you know, the libertarian hedonistic pedophiles are the ones who are scooping up the spoils. It's
on that very dark note, we're almost out of time. Have you got any so this is it. This is the stuff that, you know, the feedback that I get from viewers, it is these dark topics that others refuse to go there, that they like to hear people talking about out loud, you know. And you know, we've touched on a lot of these over the year and a bit of Terf Talk, and you know, they really resonate with people because, you know, people know that there's something wrong, but they don't really, you know, that you, and that's the thing too, that's that survivor's thing where, you know, there's something wrong, but until someone else that you trust comes in and says, you know, you're right, you know, you have reason to be alarmed, I see it too. Then you can go, oh, thank goodness. And then the rage can come, you know. But there's a lot of people that just even the process of waking up to this ideology is traumatizing. When you realize that it's staring you in the face, you know.
Well, the whole world works on denial.
Yes.
And it protects you from the most terrible betrayals. And I really understand why people live lifetimes of denial. I mean, I've been absolutely kicked to the curb because people can't face the truth. But, you know, there's something about the truth that is the healer. And the truth has been sort of put up there as, you know, the enemy. You just don't go there. You just don't face the truth. You don't face reality. You just keep busy in denial systems, and everyone's pretty much in the same system. But to say, okay, I want the truth. I want to find a wellspring of energy and love from within my own being. And that is really, to me, what true spirit is. Patriarchy is absolutely sucked all the life out of religious structures. But there is spirit, and there is something greater than us. And I learned that in AA, and I learned that in women's spirituality, that there is this thin, you know, vertical, energetic, you know, stream. And we have to keep doing this. Otherwise, we're plugging in to all the addictive substances, people, places, and things to keep ourselves sustained. But actually, there is a spiritual stream that is very personal, and that you can work with that. And this is why, you know, the 12-step programs have been, you know, brought people back from the dead, basically, you know, who just lost everything again, and again, even their, you know, their lives. But there is something that you can build from within. It's free, and you can do it in your own way and time. And there's plenty around to help you find some sense of spirit. And that is really the key to this, because what's, you know, patriarchy is built on lies, and they're all crumbling because it just, you know, one thing I did learn in year 5 and 6 economics, which didn't seem to make any sense to me, but one thing I remember is the law of diminishing returns, and that you have to put more and more energy for less and less effect. And most people live some kind of addictive life. The thing that helped me to get into AA was when I just felt I can't possibly do that, I'm such a nice girl, was Carl Jung saying that all the addicts that alcoholics that he worked with had a thirst for the spirit. Yeah. They had a thirst for the spirit that was offered in materialism in the bottle, and that you have to go beyond the bottle to find the real spirit. And that gave me my dignity, and so I was in. And it's a big investment in my life, really, to just not jump ship on the truth, and to just keep coming back to that true north. And it's it's what I give to the world. It's my legacy to the world. I don't look like I've done much in my life, but my God, to stand up in a snowstorm is pretty hard work. And it's the legacy I give to my children, my grandchildren and their grandchildren, because there are enormous lies in my family. And the further it goes down the line, the more obscure it is and the more you think you're mad. So you have to find things that really bring reality. And I was going to say before that Dr. Jessica, what's her name? She's an English woman.
No, Taylor.
Yeah. Sexy, fabulous book that really undoes all the DSM, all the ways that women are pathologized in a system that hates them. And then there's a nice little pharmaceutical you can take for it. Bullshit. I love books, but I would burn that book because I've
got a dog coming in. It's not me going rabid. Yeah. Yeah.
Although I would understand if you did. Thanks, Angie. It's been great to talk.
No, look, I could listen to you talk all night, to be honest. But I hope if I don't see you before, I hope to see you on the 18th of March, because I think it'd be great if you can speak. It would be really good for people to hear you. Yeah.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, I thought, right, I know what I'm going to say. And then I had a few days of feeling really kind of distressed, like deep distress. I thought, something's going on. And I could feel this really young child, really frightened to speak, because, to not speak was to speak was, being killed. You're dead, mate, if you speak. And if you tell the secrets. And I thought, oh God, 40 years, I just talk all the time, but it's still there, this fear about speaking the truth.
Yeah.
So there bells on.
I have it too. I still I have a more like a pathological fear of public speaking, would you believe? The only way I can do this channel is if I just pretend that it's just you and I talking, and maybe one or two of us listen to it later, because I too have that thing where I wasn't believed. I said this is what's happening and I wasn't believed, and that's why I absolutely and utterly refuse. I refuse to let people lie. Oh no, they're coming at me from all directions. I've got a cat here, a kid there, and I've got a dog attacking me.
Time to go.
On that note, I'll see you soon, Ruth. Thank you so much. And everybody, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more madness and wonderful talk. So, thank you very much. See you later, Ruth.
Bye-bye.
Bye.